Hey, my name is Israel Hernandez. For my book review, the book that I read it's titled This Changes Everything Capitalism versus the Climate by Naomi Klein. A little bit about the author. She was born on May 8th, 1970, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. What brought her to notoriety was when she published her No Logo in 1999, criticizing big corporate uh, businesses that were exploiting their workers in the pursuit of greater profit. In 2016, she was awarded the Sydney Peace Prize for her activism on climate change, and she's currently a senior correspondent for The Intercept and is a professor at the University of British Columbia. So, start off in the intro on page 3. The book consists of three parts. Part 1 is chapter 1 and 5. Part 2 is chapter 6 and 8, and part 3 is chapters 9 and 13. So on the intro, she states that she was a little bit hesitant of climate change. Like she thought that it might have been, it wasn't really an issue to be focused on. And then she later says throughout the intro that it's a very big problem. She also highlights in her intro that the cheapness for wind and solar has gone down. The money of dark money, how it plays a role into the political sector in regards to getting things done, like climate initiatives, and how it's an obstacle. On chapter 1, she directs this quote just right off the bat by the I think the director of U.S. Chambers of Commerce. He quotes this guy: "There is no way this can be done without fundamentally changing the American way of life, choking off economic development, and putting large segments of our economy out of business." So she's basically insinuating that in order to combat climate change, we need to revamp the whole thing. And one some of the ways that she cites we can do that, or some initiatives and social programs, it's in chapter 2. She cites the reform of healthcare. She also cites public transit, which is a big factor in decreasing the amount of CO2 by the public. When you have public transportation, people don't rely on individual cars to getting from point A to point B. Like trains, buses, they have an impact in reducing CO2. One of the things that managed to catch my attention was in chapter 4 of her book. She cites the Obama administration's its missed opportunity in regards to revamping the economy where it would be more in the public sector. She says, all told, three huge economic engines, the banks, the auto companies, and the stimulus bills, were the state of play, replacing more economic power in the hands of Obama and his party than any U.S. government since the administration of FDR. Imagine, for a moment, if his administration had been willing to invoke its newly minted Democratic mandate to build the new economy promised on the campaign trail to treat the stimulus bill and broken banks and the shattered car companies as the building blocks for the green future. So she basically says that there was a missed opportunity. The Obama administration completely just missed due to a lack of political will. She's right. And one of the reasons why she's right is given the state of our social and political climate as of right now. I think if Obama would have done, put on an iron fist, things would have been very, very differently. And yeah, I feel like she's totally correct on that take. So moving on to part 2 of the book, chapter 5, the land ethic is referenced, which I thought was pretty cool, because that was in her homework and she references that. That was kind of interesting. That kind of made me get a little yeah. So I think still in part 2, chapter 7, she cites Richard Branson. If that name sounds familiar, he was the billionaire. He is the CEO of Virgin Airlines. He went to space with Jeff Bezos. She cites him when back in 2006, when Al Gore came out with his documentary of Inconvenient Truth, which was a documentary about climate change. she cites how Richard Branson was like, moved, and he wanted to do more in regards to diminishing CO2 emissions, and he pledged to donate like $3 billion and something like that around that area fund, 3 billion. But then she cites how like he completely missed the mark. He didn't back his pledge. He only donated about 100 million. And she says, she cites that story, and she follows up by saying, the idea that capitalism and only capitalism can save the world from its crisis degree, but capitalism is no longer an abstract theory. It is a hypothesis that has been tested and retested in the real world. We are now able to set theory aside and take a hard look at the results, at the celebrities and media conglomerates that were supposed to model a green ethic lifestyles, who have long since moved on the next fad. And then she follows up by saying, she ends, and most of all, at the parade of billionaires who are going to invent a new form of enlightened capitalism, but decide that, on second thought, the old one was just too profitable to surrender. So she's basically citing how profit always comes first. Profit always comes first, no matter the cost. So if these billionaires were to invent some sort of miracle or geoengineering miracle to decrease CO2, they would be like, well, this is not creating enough profit for me. Why would I do this? Let's just go back to the old system that we had. And yeah, I mean, it's totally true. Like, capitalism is not a it's not a resource to fully implement radical change to combat CO2. And she's totally right, and I agree with her. One of the things that she cites in chapter 8, she says, in reference to engineering, she cites that, I think she cites this philosopher. He quotes him: "You can test a vaccine on a person, putting that person at risk without putting everyone else at risk. You can't build a scale model at the atmosphere or 10th off part of the atmosphere. As such, you can go differently from a different model to full-scale planetary-wide implementation. Untested and untestable and dangerous beyond belief." So she's basically saying how geoengineering is not an adequate source to combat CO2. Like, she was referencing SMR, solar. I think, what was it? Solar management radiation, which basically, I think they were they were pumping sulfur dioxide, and it happened to decrease CO2, but the consequences are not yet known. How it can affect weather patterns around the world, and how it can affect given communities in a given location. So she cites that geoengineering is not the answer to decrease our CO2 emissions. And she further cites this notion that capitalism is just not the answer to the problems that we're facing right now. I think she cites, it says, "The conclusion between corporations and the state has been so porously defined, and it is almost as if the communities standing in the way of these projects are viewed as little more than overburdened, that ugliest of words used to extravagate industries to describe the waste earth that must be removed to access as Tarzans, like the trees." Oh no, that's a different quote. But anyways, she basically says, that's a different quote that I'm citing. She says that capitalism always comes first, profit always comes first, in a given society like ours, and in a given society like ours in the United States. Profit always drives, just the corporate mentality. Like, if they were to decide, oh, let's stop producing things that emit CO2, they're not going to do that, because that diminishes their profit earnings. And in a capitalist society, she cites that capitalism always comes first. And again, I agree with that. Just take a look at, the gas industry. They're not going to stop producing oil. Why would they? It's decreasing their profits each quarter. If they were to, you know, do that, just it's almost kind of like a fantasy land to rely on corporations like oil to stop CO2 emissions when they are profiting off of the pollution that they're contributing to the planet. And yeah, I mean, it's sad, but I mean, it's true. And in her conclusion, she cites a quote from MLK. This is again part 3, just the final section of the book. She cites this quote from MLK. We as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must radically begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. So, in order to fully change a society to a more not necessarily a more progress in a given society, one needs to, you know, set aside materials as first comes first and put them just behind what needs to be put in that first place, which is just basic rights, civil rights, liberty. And if we don't do that, you know, materialism will not be conquered, and challenging that would be extremely difficult. But she finishes off in her conclusion that social movements are like the gas pedal to further implement climate initiatives to combat the rise in CO2 emissions. And she cites how we need like a FDR New Deal momentum to further nail this in the coffin, to, you know, revamp and just completely overhaul the social and political structure of the United States. And then she further states that there's hope to do this, but, you know, as of right now, it doesn't seem like it. Maybe there is, but I'm kind of a pessimist. Hopefully I'm wrong, but, you know, things can change. But as of right now, I don't see things getting better. Things might get a little worse before they get better, but as of right now, in regards to climate initiatives and lowering CO2, it's just not there. But hopefully I'm wrong. And hopefully in the near future, like 20 to 30 years from now, our CO2s will decline, but that's just the hope. So yeah, book is called This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate. Naomi Klein, 8.5 out of 10. Give it a read. Yeah, that's my review. Good book.